try to shape politics.
Wait, speak louder. They are. They gather.
It's because it passed by too fast.
Yeah, they gather.
And
Any policy related appeals to guys?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, elected officials.
Isn't that an elected official?
Yeah, and that's sometimes called Congress. So it says organized group of individuals that
Oh, that was the word.
make policy.
and then for what they do, like,
I got that.
That make policy.
and you know they exist too.
I gotta
Just like policies that, so like when there's like elections or something, like these whole policies,
What? What? Huh? It's next to the building. Like, you know where Popeyes is? It's just on the other side of the building.
If you could start to pause your table conversations, we'll just share it on these two before we watch pretty much the second half of the video. So Luis, what is an interest group?
Oh, of course. I just feel like organize people to seek influence to public policy.
People influencing public policy. I'm crazy. All right, and what do they do, Taylor?
They shape politics. They gather information for elected officials. Oh, policies.
They shape policy.
And they also provide Congress with information.
Can you repeat that last thing so I couldn't hear it?
Gather information for Congress groups.
And she corrected politics to policies.
Policies, yes. Nolan, do you want to add on?
I have a question.
Yes.
In the video, I think it also said they help Congress with support and they provide laws.
They're supposed to provide information that congressmen and women can use to write laws. Sometimes they may contribute heavily to the bills that are being written.
I heard him say they pressure.
Yeah, through lobbying. We'll talk about that a little bit later today.
Is it important to know what they aren't, or is that just like for the sake of?
It can just help you flesh out this answer
Okay.
in reverse. Yeah. Okay, good points. While we watch the second half, what I want you to look for, so adding these two subheadings or columns to your notes, the rest of the episode, or sorry, I guess you could call it an episode?
Yeah, it's YouTube.
Rest of the video is mostly just weighing the pros and cons of interest groups. So I want you to look for arguments in favor of interest groups and arguments against interest groups. Sorry? Yes.
Absolutely.
Makes it sound much more exciting. Maybe I should call it
The next
an episode.
Do they have too much influence? To sort this out, I'm going to need some help from some friends. And by friends, I mean clones, which aren't my friends. Let's head to the clone zone. Okay, here we are, clone zone. It's just like the regular zone, except that thing's gone and there's a graphic. So today, Clone with the tie is going to argue that interest groups are good for American democracy, and Clone without the tie is going to argue that they're bad. He also has bad fashion sense. Okay, go. The main argument in favor of interest groups has to do with pluralism. If all interest groups are free to compete to influence officials, then they'll balance each other out. It'll be cool. The idea of incorporating lots of groups goes back at least as far as James Madison. In the Federalist Papers, Madison argued for extending the sphere in American politics and encouraging more and more factions. The theory was that the more groups there were, the less likely that any one group could gain a corrupting influence over the government. Sort of like the idea of the wisdom of crowds, or Condorcet's jury theorem. With more interest groups providing more information, we will get policies that are the result of thoughtful compromise. Another argument for interest groups is that they offer more opportunity for participation in politics. Elections only happen every 2 years, on the federal level at least, but policy gets made all the time. Or at least it's supposed to. By joining an interest group, an individual can push for a policy they care about all the time, not just at election time. And isn't participation the essence of democracy? I think yes. Sure, it's great to have more voices involved in policy making as long as each voice is powerful enough to be heard. And in the current system, that is just not the case. Interest group politics diminishes American democracy because some interest groups are so powerful that their voices are able to crowd out all the others. And in America today, the people with the loudest voices are the wealthy. And me right now. And it's not only because the wealthy have more money to give to politicians, although that does help. Obviously, people who are really poor can't offer campaign contributions, but there are plenty of advocates for them. But in America, the wealthy have other resources that the poor people just can't bring to bear. Like money. Lots and lots of money. They tend to be better educated, so they have access to more information and the ability to disseminate their views more articulately. And just as important, wealthy people have more time to devote to political participation than the poor. Sure, what you're saying makes sense, but do you have any proof? I mean, there are plenty of laws protecting poor people. What about the earned income tax credit? Well, I have a chart. Oh. You can see that the number of PACs, while not exactly the same thing as interest groups, has grown an awful lot since the mid-1970s. Corporate interests, which by and large represent wealthy people, vastly outnumber the groups representing working people, like labor and cooperative groups. In numbers alone, wealthy interest groups would seem to have more power than other groups. But that's not all. A series of studies that culminated in the book Affluence and Influence by Martin Gillens shows pretty definitively that Congress is much more likely to enact laws that respond to the interests of the wealthy than the poor. It's not that they never took poor people's interests into account, it's just that they are much, much more likely to make policies that favor the rich. Is that the essence of democracy? I think no. Thanks, you beautiful clones. So, there you have the basics of interest groups in America and why they're so controversial. I hope that you now have a better understanding of what interest groups are and what they are not, and how they work to influence policy and government, which is their main function in the American political system. You should also know what the Iron Triangle is and why people complain so much about interest groups in America today, other than they haven't had their coffee yet. Where's my coffee? Thank you. But I also hope that you understand the idea of pluralism. It's a powerful idea and one that, if taken seriously, shows the importance of participation in politics. It's empty. And that's ultimately what interest groups do for us. They give us another avenue to have our voices heard and contribute to the policies that shape our lives. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
All right. I'm just going to leave that freeze frame for all of us for the rest of the day. Could you turn to somebody around you and share the arguments you heard in favor and arguments against?
Okay, so like if you have a bunch of money, your interest group can like suggest things more aggressively and then prosecute like laws and stuff, you know? And then the without the money, they don't really have a voice.
Yeah, exactly. Some art.
It's more opportunity for participation.
Like
In favor? Oh, and it gives you time, like, it gives you
Yeah,
a voice
those are
like
somewhat
all the time,
community statements, but
instead of just during elections.
so one of the pros is the idea that you can give more voice to people, but then the other con is that in reality, your voices get heard.
because it holds your conference. Like having a what?
Yeah, which I guess.
I said it offers more opportunity for participation, and then you
Special
can
interest.
do it all the time.
The special interest group is not, it's not like the group has the same amount.
For against, not all voices are powerful, it's only the rich people. Like, if you're really rich, you can just, you have everything. And you can get your opinion out there more, because you have money, you can travel with that and spread the word. And then the ones without, on a low budget, it's like, well, we have our opinion, so, and it's here. Can't really say anything.
So they're ready to move forward. So if I could have us pause our table conversations. Let's hear, if I call your name, you can share an argument in favor or an argument against. Either way, we don't have to go in order. So let's start by hearing from Charisse, Sammy, and Delilah. And Max, sure.
In favor, right, they provide opportunities for participation in elections.
Opportunities to participate. What was the last part that you said, Charisse?
In elections.
In elections and also in addition to elections, right? So during election time, we get a lot of emails, you get a lot of people who are volunteering to sign up, but these give you a way to participate all the time, not just when there's elections happening. Awesome. Sammy and Delilah, what do we want to add on?
Can I do it for against arguments against? Sorry, it's the only one I have. But like, I put that interest groups who are rich and have money, they have a louder voice and they get things done that maybe other people don't want.
Yeah, if you have one group that gets all the say in something, they're going to make decisions that benefit that same group. Delilah, what
We're
else?
in favor. It said the more groups there are, the less likely they are to influence the government.
Okay. And Max, did you have one to add, or you just want to do your card?
For against, it says that the wealthy people usually will have more time as well. And since they have more money, that also increases the louder voice that was mentioned earlier that they have in politics.
Okay. Good. Nolan, what else?
I said that in favor, it like kind of briefly mentioned it, but for the in favor side was pluralism.
Which has to do with this part. Good catch. Any others that you have that we are missing up here? Yes, Hannah.
I think they're in favor. I heard that they balance each other out,
Okay.
so there's more of an equality.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So in theory, right, the idea is that if you have all these different groups, they can speak equally, they can balance each other's interests, hear both sides of the issue. We kind of see that in reality, it has a lot to do with what kind of resources that you have, though. That's a good point. Yeah, Aisha.
Since they have more time, like Max said, they have more time to like get more educated.
Yeah, so we see how this one thing that already kind of widens the gap a little bit more leads to these other things that lead to more and more of a distinction of which groups get heard. There's kind of a ripple effect there. Any questions on anything else that came up in the video or on the stat? Yeah.
It was just for that against, they said that Congress was, usually was more likely to enact the laws of the rich rather than the poor or wealthy interest groups.
That's to do with congressional support. Good. Yeah, Lisa, sorry.
What iron triangle was?
Yeah, well, we can do that briefly. We skipped the part about bureaucracies, which is why that word may have seemed a little bit off. So we have this thing called the iron triangle. Does anybody remember any of those 3 points of the triangle?
It was Congress, bureaucracy, and.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I wrote this so small. Get out your binoculars. Interest.
What does it mean by bureaucracy?
What is bureaucracy?
Well, not what it is specifically, but how does it play into
Parts of government that are not elected, but that still work with moving policies forward in legislation, right? So like, you have all these people who are elected, but then there are all these other people behind them that have to actually get stuff done. Or who work in offices, or who write regulations for what kind of foods we're allowed to have in America, or what kind of labor laws we're allowed to have, stuff like that. So this is basically just showing the sphere of influence, right? So interest groups can influence these 2, bureaucracy can influence these 2, and Congress can influence these 2. So just how they're all kind of related. Anything else I can clarify? We're going to add to our notes with a couple more points about interest groups. We're going to go off of a slideshow that is linked right here on today's slides. We're going to start with a hypothetical scenario. Please do not freak out. First mod was mad at me. I know. As if I had this much power to make this big of a change. All right. So from this, Lupita, could I have you read that opening scenario for us? The opening hypothetical scenario.
The state legislature has just passed a law changing the minimum age requirement to get a driver's license in the state of California to the age of 21 years old. Governor Brown is debating whether to sign the bill into law, but has first agreed to hear input from Californians before making his decision.
Thank you. So I want you to discuss, to start, the questions that are in the yellow box on the left. So who does this decision affect? In what ways does it affect them? Do you support or oppose this law? And what can you personally do to convince Governor Brown to agree with you? Go ahead and turn and talk to the people around you.
Here's what I think. This decision affects us, our children,
I'm not yelling at you, I'm saying it doesn't affect us. It affects you. It also affects the parents that have to
changing the law.
Not
So it affects us because we just got to the age all drive like that. But it also affects people. Let me tell you, who are like adult parents, and that is like when my child was driving, like, so like if they see that, they have to, it's not right just to pick up, oh, I can't drive. Different opportunities come from driving.
Yes, like my cousin's 15 and she's driving, but they have income from YC and she's able to drive. She wasn't able to drive.
Did they already change it?
Even though it will be 18 is still more. So you need to drive all the way.
I don't know, you're just kind of
College is expensive. You don't have money to eat every how am I gonna go home for the holidays?
Because you can't just get a plane ticket for $1,000.
What if you're going to college all the way across country?
That's what I'm drive to like
Did you hear what she said? I said, what if you're going to college? She goes, that's a really
say that you can't do that. That would be like a 5 logically possible.
There's an ocean.
That's like a 5.